Hello, this is a recording that will explain some of the multiplayer rules and some of the normal things that happen in multiplayer as you can contrast to single player. And we can start off with explaining some of the multiplayer rule sets. For example, if we go to a Discord server and we might find some rules. Let's see if we can go for here and we'll go for rules. This will say perhaps KLS rule set. KLS is quite famous player, he's quite experienced, so he has certain kinds of rules. And we might see that there are some banned countries here, and we might wonder like why are there banned countries in Hearts of Iron? There are a couple of different reasons. Well, first of all, the first thing the host wants certain countries failed to get a game, right? And he wants the countries like Soviet Union, Germany, Italy, and all those considered majors. And those are United Kingdom, France, USA, Soviet, Italy, Germany, Japan are considered majors, and those wants to be filled up first. You don't want to fill up those smaller nations first. Because you can start a decent balanced game without the majors if you're gonna do a normal game. So that's part of the bat. And if you have too many players, someone will lag down the game, and you can't like force the game to sit on one speed. It will just lag down. And basically the game will take forever. So let's say you have a game at speed 2 or 3 up here, and if that was speed 3 or 3, you would play for 10 hours if you get to 1941 basically. Maybe that's actually possible if you would play at speed 2. But let's say you actually get a game at speed 4. Well, your total game time might be like 4 to 5 hours. That's fantastic. But what actually happens in games is that once wars starts, you go to speed 3. So a game ends up taking 5 to 6 hours anyways. There's no way around it because at speed 4 it's hard to micro against tanks that are very quick. What's happening in the game? No, nothing particular. This game is not a serious game, it's just a multiplayer game where I have with friends and some random people, by the way, for those who would like to see it. And why there are certain things about Romania. Let's say you have two options. Either we can sacrifice some political power for some consumer goods to construct faster, but I'll always take less consumer goods. Rather less factories, more higher consumer goods to save the political power. And that's because if you get the correct ministers, like let's say this one, it scales better into the later stages of the game. You don't get a lot of industry in Romania at all. So basically, if you lose a percentage of industry, it's not as much as if you would lose it later on, and you will get rid of these minuses anyways. So it's not relevant if you get less industry early game. So those are those points, and also like let's say you usually need for a full game you need 15 players, and that can take a while. So it will take some time. And if you're sitting on a lot of smaller nations, well, it just wastes your time anyways, and a lot of them will not follow the multiplayer rule sets, which takes up the host's time, which is very annoying for him. It's not pleasant at all. So that's why you ban countries as well. And certain countries are more easily to troll with. Like you can actually ruin multiplayer games if you do certain things. let's say you can actually release your country to another, give like all your land to another country. Let's say you're started communist China, you give all your land to China, and then you become an observer, and you can choose to become a country which a player does not control. Or you do it the other way, you release China to People's Republic of China, and just then rejoin as another country and do that over and over again, and you can get all of China at once, and you're one of the strongest nations in the world if you do it at the start of the game. That's considered an exploit. For more basically obvious reasons, I believe you can do the same for Austria. If you start as Austria, release it to Germany, and then just go in as Germany, and you get the land for free. You basically just cheat the game, more or less. There are a lot of those things. Like basically, where there are rule sets in the first place is because for multiplayer, if you want a decently historical and balanced games, you need to not allow everything, because all the things in the games are not good for multiplayer. One of those things are, for example, we have strategic bombers, and we might ask ourselves, why are strategic bombers like banned, for example? And there are a couple of reasons. Some might say they're overpowered, and well, kind of they are. And you might play a single player game, and you might say, well, I can't bomb an enemy nation to like the Stone Age or something. Like I can't stop Germany when I'm UK and I'm strategic bombing Germany. Nothing happens. And well, that's technically not true. You need to do it properly. What do you need to do if you tried strategic bombers? You need to ask that question first. Like, how do you actually do it? You can start building strategic bombers with all military factories at 1936, and then build some heavy fighters or normal fighters as well. Let's say you do that, and well, what's the effect of using, like, and you also need the doctrine as well, plus air doctrine, strategic destruction. What's going to occur? Let's say Germany has 2,000 planes at 1939, and you have, let's say you have 800 strategic bombers and 1,000 fighters. 1939 August, and you put them up in northwest Germany. What happens? Against the AI, in this case. And you might say, like, well, I bombed some things. Some factories get destroyed, of course. Well, that's obvious, actually. The secondary thing is that what is considered like a broken mechanic in the game is that Germany's fighters will target the bombers. Your fighters target enemy fighters, and they will get an escort bonus for escorting bombers. This does not apply to mission strategic bombing, and I believe it's 2 fighters plus 1 strategic bomber is the most optimum. If you go 3 fighters, one of them will not get the buff or whatever. Okay, what occurs here is that strategic bombers have very high health, and you can only engage two fighters can only fight. Two fighters shoot at one strategic bomber. That's the maximum. And they both need to do full damage or whatever. And hit the bomber. They need to find the bomber, hit the bomber, make maximum damage to kill it. Because it has so high health. You cannot, for example, have 10 fighters shooting at one, going up at one bomber, and just shoot it down. The game mechanic only allows two planes to engage one. If you would have the same number of planes, the strategic bombers become invulnerable. So that's interesting in itself, but let's say you put up the fighters as well, and you make it even worse for the German fighters. Well, your fighters will not die, because the enemy bombers your bombers are targeted. Okay. And then they just shoot down enemy fighters. So maybe you fight for a month, 30 days, and the result is 10 of your fighters dead of yours, and one bomber. German losses 500 fighters. And that's 11 planes to 500. If you do that for 1 year, Germany has 0 planes. Okay, well then that process is done. Well then you can just use your bombers freely, and just use them all over Germany. You can spread them out, like 400 bombers over northwest, 400 in here, 400 here. And if 400 bombers engage couple fighters, whatever, you just put some extra fighters, like heavy fighters or whatever, and just kill the AI. Yeah, what's up? I don't care too much. Do you think we will get the full game? Okay. How I see these players, it's like if you press F2 on your keyboard, you can see which players play which countries. And this is my friend, so maybe I want to play some allied nation. I'll get France then. Nice. Bombers on each zone, and you just destroy 100% of Germany's factories before 1941. And if they lose all civilians are destroyed, you can't even repair. He lost, basically. And you destroy all the infrastructure, so you basically can't get any supplies for his soldiers anyways. So you can actually kill an AI with strategic bombing. You just have to put all your factories at it, and then just put your navy around UK main island. Maybe France dies, but you can just bomb everything to the Stone Age actually. What does my friend say? What she wants is still mean game. Thank you. Okay, that's strategic bombing. So basically the mechanic of fighters just targeting bombers in this instance, and your fighters shooting enemy fighters, that's one of the major reasons for banning strategic bombers, because they make your fighters invulnerable as well, and then the losses become horrendous for the enemy. So basically you can put up like 100 strategic bombers and 1,000 airplanes, and you just use them on strategic bombing just to buff your fighters. So and the secondary reason is that you can't intercept them on their way. So let's say you're in the UK, that's what the most common for strategic bombing. Airplanes actually in this game teleport. They don't fly all the way. They just appear here from UK, and so the enemy has to put up planes here. You can't intercept them if you put up your fighters in the English Channel. There's no way. They just instantly appear up here. In the best case scenario, you can put up enough fighters to just disrupt the bombing, not kill the bombers. and that makes less of them like drop the bombs. But what happens in multiplayer games is that, let's say you have a Canada or New Zealand, and he gets all the strategic bombers, you just send them to him, and then he just jumps around on air zones and just bombs the enemy. And there is no way to counter it properly. If you played Hearts of Iron 3 and Hearts of Iron 2, you could actually intercept the bombers when they were on their way. So actually, if you had a lot of fighters on Germany and Italy and everyone, just put them over England, they would start over here and the strategic bombers would not lift off and bomb everything here at the start of the game. So there's two issues with strategic bombers, and that's why they are banned. And the other things with let's say we go back to what are the rules overall in multiplayer games. Like, you might want to have a game where you can actually fight Axis against allies, and you don't want, for example, people like South Africa or someone else to turn over to the Axis and make it a very unbalanced game. It's basically for balancing reasons. You have a lot of rules. It's just to make up for there are no options to set in the game to just set like, oh, they're France, United Kingdom, everyone are just allied and they can't break the alliance. Like, if you actually want to, you can actually turn fascist as the France and everything, and you can just make a mega alliance if you would like to. And most players don't want that at all when they have rules. They want to prohibit that, and a lot of different things. And there are certain exploits as well in the game that are you can do, and that ruins the game. And let's say we go to the next one. How do experienced players so easily realize if someone is inexperienced in multiplayer? This is kind of like a two questions in one. And we might say like, someone has played a lot of hours in single player. Let's say he has 500 to 1,000 hours in single player. And all the multiplayer experience is with his real life friends. And then the player goes to Discord or TeamSpeak server, and everyone quickly realizes when he plays or has opinions about the game. That he is inexperienced. Like, how does this happen? And if we go to a practical example, like if I was a new player to France, I would like put up all my divisions, perhaps my new ones to the border and everything. Let's say this game I will actually do something that most players don't do. They consider bad, but they go down here and just take all the industry. And then they build factories. Like, let's say they build civilians actually, but I will not do it this game. Or maybe I can build a couple. Let's say I build one. And if someone is asking me as France, and I'm new to the multiplayer scene with Discord and TeamSpeak, and then people ask me, what do you do as France? And I'm like, oh, I'm gonna do some industry and then research slots and some military things and some other things here. No, I'm not gonna do fascist friends. I'm gonna do maybe 10 wits or something. Yeah, I need the Air Force. What country are you, by the way? Yeah, just build some fighters. Who's the German player? Kurasov. He's doing army innovations. We can fuck him over if we do that. Are you up for it? Building some Air Force at least? Like, you don't need to build 100% Air Force. Just some. Maybe we can ask if United States builds some CAS as well. Yeah, I will build some CAS as well. And I build as France, build industry, build factories in France, plus industry focuses. Why do people consider it bad? Yeah, what up? Okay. DPM, what is DPM? Times per minute 5. And the quick answer is that Germany should always be able to take France. Germany plus Axis members, and he gets all the factories in France. So in conclusion, all factories built in France is a donation to the Axis. So what do you do instead of building it in France? Usually people they build the factories here. You see there's some free spots here you can build, factories here you can build, everything here. So that's what people do. And there's some factories here. So there are building slots to build, and then you maybe build some forts or whatever, and improve some ports, maybe some critical ports. This is a popular one to upgrade, because this will become your capital once France falls and everything. So that's one if you're France, and why people would easily spot you as a new player, because no one actually builds factories in France. Almost, there are only a couple tactics, and the German player will easily see it, and he will devote a lot of attention and effort, more than normal, to just break France if that's the case, because you can see the opposing players focuses. And would say this Germany, he went army innovations, and no one is considered that a good focus. And people might answer why is Rhineland or army innovations bad as first focus Germany? And I'll just do something in game, just set up some army training. One moment, I was doing some other stuff. I just deleted most of the stuff. Shut up. You just heard my friend asking me where I got army experience, and if you train 100% of your army, you will get army experience each day. So if you have one division, that's your whole army. You only have one division, you will get the most army experience, and it depends of that unit's amounts of brigades. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 9 plus 10 in total. So if this was just one thing in the template, I would get 0.001 per day. Now I get 0.93 instead. It's 9 times more. And if I have a template that is even larger, I can get up to 0.2 per day. That's 4 times more than a minister. And we how do I answer this question? It's quite simple. Germany has excellent focuses. Rhineland gives a lot of political power, but it increases world tension, and that's good for its enemies, the allies. That enables allies to do better focuses, because certain focuses are locked behind world tension. More than 5, more than 10. And it's actually not enough for him to do Rhineland to enable a shadow scheme for UK, because it's more than 5. So 5.0 is not enough to start this one, but there's one thing that happens in the world that is not focus related. Is the Spanish Civil War, and that raises world tension, and sending volunteers raises world tension, and Soviet always sends 5 volunteers, and that will raise the world tension by 2.4 or something. So if he does Rhineland first, and the Civil War pops, and Soviet sends volunteers, well, United Kingdom will start the shadow scheme immediately, and that will enable him to get an extra research slot, for example, and it will enable him to go Royal Ordnance, because this one, as you can see, Germany, there's a requirement that Germany either has done Rhineland or that world tension is higher than 20%. And if more things happen in the world on top of Rhineland, if it goes over 10% world tension, that's not a lot. He will get like 5% less consumer goods factories, and that's a really good thing actually. And if world tension goes over 5%, allies can change, or say 5% is technically enough if they have enough political power, and they can change to ally mobilization, and that's from a lot of minuses, 30% construction speed to 10%. That's quite a big deal. That's like having 1, 2, 3. That's almost like having 1941 construction technology in difference, and that's absurd. An absurd difference. So Rhineland is bad. It's good for allies. You don't want to do it for that reason. And army innovation is not terrible. It doesn't buff the enemies in any way, but this one is actually best. And the reasoning is that it gives civilian factories. This is six civilians and 6 more. This is 12 in total. And what the Germany players usually do is that they research construction 1 and 2. They start the second construction as soon as they've completed these 2s. And when this one is completed, this one will also finish up after that one, and the bonuses Germany usually uses for these ones. So in middle of 1938, Germany usually has construction 4 of those 50% bonuses, and that's really a crucial thing that a lot of German players does. And allows them to power up really quickly. The earlier you get to factories, the better they are, especially civilians. Because you basically, in the early game, you build civilians to get more civilians, and then you build more military factories and everything else. Everything you see in the construction tabs are dependent on civilian factories. So in the end, civilian factories will make you able to have more dockyards and more militaries, etc. Pretty obvious. So Rhineland is good for the allies, and construction focuses are the best one. Anyways, if you delay the construction focuses, you construct less things basically over time. So if you delay the construction focuses by 1 year, you lose 12 civilian factories for 1 year. That's extremely bad. So that's a simple answer actually. Just think of that one. So if you're playing Germany multiplayer and you're doing Rhineland first for the political power, and people are asking like, why are you doing Rhineland? And you say, oh, I want the political power and the army experience, and like everyone will just rage at you, calling you an utter retard, because these ones are obviously best. You don't need the political power. It's not that important compared to these ones. These ones are absolutely crucial. And this doesn't bring you closer to this one. This actually helps your enemies. That's why people get upset if you do start with this one. So that's that part. How the people easily spot new players on Germany. If the world tension, if you're playing United Kingdom and the world tension would rise to 15% or something, and like, how do you spot a UK player? Again, you might wonder like, I am playing UK and I'm playing multiplayer and I develop my Commonwealth. I go down here. I get some national unity, some more useful stuff, but this one is actually nice. Everyone gets this 5% research time. Then you go to Commonwealth ties and you develop your dear allies instead of going this one if the world tension is high. You might wonder why are these ones considered worse than going general rearmament, and the answer is quite simple here as well. Like, let's say you give Canada some factories. Well, they're in the Great Depression, like the United States. Those civilian factories are like nerfed until the Great Depression has ended, and that takes a few years. Raj can actually use them, so this actually happens sometimes that develop in Raj, but why is it better to do general armament with consumer good factories and everything? Well, this consumer good factories are one thing, but the secondary is that it unlocks these things. And why are these things? This is basically useless in itself, but this is fighter models. Fighters are crucial to winning the war. If you lose the air war, most of the time you have lost. So if you can get better fighter models that are basically, if you get the fighter 2s are double as good as fighter 1s at least, then fighter 3s are double as better as fighter 2s. You can think of it like that. So basically going up 2 levels in fighters, you get 4 times stronger. You can think of it like that. And this one also reduces the cost of producing new fighters. So basically this one is the most cost-effective way of winning the war. Getting better fighters and producing more of them. These one are more factories. And secondarily you can develop your allies if you would like to. Raj especially, these ones are not important at all. So if your UK and the world tension goes up, instantly get rid of general armament, go down the fighters, and just get this part. This one is never required because in multiplayer games you basically don't get infantry equipment, you just build fighters and you let your allies do the land warfare. So that's it. That's why people can see if you're new or not. And if you're Russia, let's put the new Soviet player. You know, like, well, how do you see if he is experienced or not? Well, you can see that this one is not. This is a good example. He's doing great purge first. You might ask, well, doing great purge first, that denies the civil war. Well, that's technically correct, but those who has played the game a bit knows that the civil war can only happens later on, and you can do about like 8 focuses before, and then do great purge. You can even do 10, I believe. They do great purge. Because they're afraid of getting the civil war. That's why they do great purge early. And if you know how the game works, you don't need to do it early. Yeah, and early is considered. There we go. And you might wonder which ones are important and why. And I can this is also a simple question to ask. This one is okay, but you can't do it first. You need to do this one at least first. Not necessarily this one. And the reason is that Soviet Union started with civilian economy that is a horrendous economy law. Basically, you can think of economy laws as basically you only want to go down. You never want to go up. Because basically more of your population will take up your civilian factories the higher you go. So basically civilian economy means that your population is just eating up 30% of your civilian factories and you get nothing in return. It's not like the previous games where you maybe get some more money from it. It doesn't work like that. So basically the more further down you go, the more factories you can use for your war economy and just pump out more factories. The only negative is on total mobilization, where you get less of a recruitable population. So keep that in mind sometimes. It's sometimes relevant. So not all German players go total mobilization when they start the war. Perhaps some of them stay in war economy. Soviet players always go total mobilization. Japan goes total mobilization as well as soon as it goes at war with China, for example. So it's basically just the further down you go, the better it goes for you. So, and this brings us to the point of political power allows you to change this civilian economy as soon as possible to partial immediately because it's communist. He doesn't at 0% world tension. He can change to partial because it's authoritative, basically non-democracy state. And the second thing that what players change on Soviet is to free market. So you will see partial free market and a Minister of Industry that will increase the construction speed of infrastructure, refineries, and civilian factories and infrastructure, whatever. And well, what do you do then after? There's actually, some might think that there's a question or like questionable to go down this one, or if you should go to this one, or whatever you should do, and everyone goes this path. It's like no one ever goes down this. Like people will just rage quit if the Soviet player goes down there. Like it's considered a troll game if the Soviet player goes down here and here. And we might look through them and we might say, oh, there's some construction speed here, there's some women can go into the army, and we got some population here and everything. And it's like, no, technically compared to these ones, like this does nothing for you. It gives some construction speed. That's the only thing that's kind of useful. But you see here is 5% research speed. This is actually crucial when you're researching ahead of time. That saves you a lot of time. This gives you an general that, or like a minister that buffs your tanks, and tanks are really important for Russia. Oh, okay, then we got two really important focuses here that you can only do if you don't go down here. And this one, oh, recruitable population. Well, that's okay at least. There's a research slot. Everything is useful, and this one is actually crucial. People might wonder why is it good to have a 50% bonus. Well, you will actually use it for fighter freeze. That's the only way for Russia to get fighter freeze in early on. So he will basically, before 1940, he will have fighter freeze, like the research done, and that's excellent. And that's the only way for Russia to get it. So that's an easy tell to tell if the Russian player knows what he's doing or not. Does he go down purge early? Does he not go Stalin Constitution? And basically they do go down here, do the aviation cult, and do this thing, and then go purge. And you never go this one, you always go to this one. That's an easy tell. And so basically, it's easy to see if there's a new player in a country. Then you want to wonder what the skilled players do and what the new players do. These ones are always not necessarily too easy to see at all times. This is like we can spot it by the focuses. There's one. Proper templates. What is meant by templates? That's those things. And you wonder, how can you see an enemy template? Well, I'll move my ships here and I'll show you how to see an enemy template soon enough. And I'll probably be able to see the German templates. He's probably not deleted his divisions. You can actually see the enemy's divisions. He has 29 to 49, so he probably has not deleted a single division or not deployed a single division as well. And you might wonder, like, why have I deleted? Well, I explained it earlier. You get army experience by training the whole of your army, and you only want the one division. And I will actually turn off the... Well, I should not train that one division. It should be mountaineers. So sorry. It should be like that. Like this. 2, 3. And I should change the template here to a mountaineer template. There we go. And it's... See, this is 50% more arm experience because I have more battalions in my division. This is excellent. There are actually more ways to get army experience than fighting wars. This is one, training army. I'll be back in 1 second. And I should not be researching construction. I should be researching something else. I think this German player is not too experienced, or we can build some SPGs or something. I can explain later perhaps why. What SPGs does. It actually just kills infantry, but I can later on explain the reasoning behind it. Should we get the research slot or more industry? We want the research slot. We need to apply this. There we go. We might ask, like, how does a good template look? Well, we don't need to necessarily go into too much of it, but proper templates might mean 14 infantry in one, like, template, and there's like 14 of those, and 4 artillery, and engineers slash plus radio support equipment. That's a decent template. We can put some more if you have more infantry equipment, of course. But that would be a proper template. And what does a new player do? Maybe they post like, oh, I have 10 infantry, and I have 0 artillery, and I have 1 support artillery, and I have 2 anti-air guns or something. And we might ask that player, like, why did you do that? And they're like, oh, well, the anti-air guns, they like shoot the air right, and we're like, well, technically correct, but what do you hope to do? Tanks will just overrun them. Enemy infantry, just this template will just kill this template. If this template attack this template will always win. It's just always better, basically. So this template is bad. Maybe they don't put in anything and it still just loses. Maybe there's no engineers or something. It's very easy to see. I mean, these are question marks. If I put up some soldiers, perhaps I can see this template. Let's see, I can see his template here. You can see that he's training, but let's say this was the template he actually used in war. I would consider him a bad player then, but he will change this template. He's a friend of mine, I know, but he will change it to 14 force, 14 force, 14 infantry, 44 artillery. So before the war, they will be decent templates. And I should change my template again. Further width. Oh fuck. Or whatever. I will have to change one later on. This is actually 15 and I need to remove one later on. It is unfortunate that I made that mistake, but whatever. Spotted by focuses and proper templates. New players say... New players say, perhaps I want to be fascist as Australia and you say, Germany boost me. You might wonder, like, why is he a new player? Well, he obviously doesn't know that USA will always stay in the Allies. There is no way that there will be a balanced game. It's not fun anyways. Like, it's easy to see. Or USA or something. Whatever country that's allied. And why do they want to become fascist? Well, usually it's because if you change to fascist, you can change your economy law and you become stronger. But there is a reason why you say early game is weaker, because if they would use all their industry, there's like 150 civilians, and Germany has like these civilians, well, United States will within 1 year will become stronger than Germany, and the game is over. It's not a game anymore. If United States become fascist, then declare war on Germany. Like, no one thinks that's funny. We're meant to have a balanced game where the more skilled players have a higher chance of winning. Basically, oh, why is the voltage been raised? Oh, Italian players fucking up basically. But this is not a serious game, so don't worry too much about what's happening here. This is just an average multiplayer game, like with all welcome rules. Maybe you should explain what all welcome are, or Discord games, what the difference are. What do trolls do? Well, they usually pick certain countries. Maybe they pick this People's Republic of China and release the country to China and just make this super China. Maybe they play some small nation and try to boost other nations to another ideology against their will, or whatever. There are a lot of things what the troll could do. Let's see here. Clean this up. What do trolls do? Pick certain nations that can affect the game in a negative way. Change side. Let's say they're meant to be. The USA goes fascist. Or Germany goes Molotov. No, goes unholy alliance with Soviet. It's considered troll moves, for example, in most games. So we should go with this one. There's a lot of those things. Multiplayer countries. What is meant by multiplayer countries? Well, it's like earlier, we want certain countries to be able to play, and you don't expect to be able to play with 40 players and not have it lag, because you need a host to have a decent up speed on this internet for one, and if one player lags, it lags for everyone, so you don't want to stack the whole game necessarily. And like, it's pretty obvious, like the Commonwealth are all the puppets of the United Kingdom. These ones, New Zealand, Malaya, whatever, those are considered Commonwealth. Those are part of the United Kingdom. And then we have France. Well, France is here, and we have the Soviet. And the Soviet is always like working together with the Allies to bring down the Axis. That's always the way it is. And then with the Axis, that's just Italy, Germany, Hungary is quite special, but it's always Axis, of course. Romania, and sometimes Sweden is allowed to be an Axis country and help the Axis out. Turkey can be a common turn, but whatever. Japan is Axis. Quite obvious if you read some history or something. And what's meant by fighter freeze? Let's say we go into a research and we like, look, maybe this is fighter 1s, or this is actually considered fighter 0, and you might wonder, why is this fighter 1, fighter 2, fighter 3? Well, if you look at this one, you would say interwar fighter. Oh, let's say close support 1. Oh, this actually gets the number here if you have a 1936 technology. This one, when you go to the production tab, it would say fighter 1 actually. This is interwar fighter, it has no number. It would actually say fighter and then 1. And that applies to all of them. So fighter freeze has a like 3 lines. When you produce it will say fighter free. This is 1944 technology, and you might wonder, like, how do we get 1944 technology like as quickly as possible? Obviously it's strong, but how do we get it like in a practical manner? And the answer is different for the Allies and the Axis. You can get it in 2 ways of the Allies. Let's say, yes? Sure. Yeah, I will. I was just preoccupied with something else. No worries. Thank you for reminding me. And the answer is different for Axis and Allies to get how to get it. Well, usually actually not. UK doesn't get the fighters first in his faction, like the Allies. It's Australia. So basically what happens is that Canada has a focus. So he quickly gets the plan, strengthen Commonwealth ties, shadow factories, and the plan? No, sorry, I lied. This one, we have the Hurricane. 50% research bonus for the Fighter 2s. And this will take a while, and meanwhile Australia will have to get this one. So when he has started the Fighter 2 research, he can get this one, and when the Fighter 2s are done, he will start. And we'll get this one. This is a 100% time bonus. It's excellent for researching Fighter 3s. And basically by 1938, at the end of 1938 or middle of 1938, the Allies can actually get Fighter 3s when Australia has done it. That means that other players can license it to produce it, but usually they just license it to research Fighter 3s themselves. And that's how they do it. If you just would hard research it without any bonuses, it would take literally forever. We can look at here, like this will take 1,723 days. These are 7 years, or no? How many years is it? 5 years? 5 years. Yeah, I will do government reform. So it would take you until 1941 plus the time for Fighter 2, so it will take you about 7 years to get it. So by 1943 you would get Fighter 3s if you just researched them without any bonuses. Yeah, it would just take 7 years. I'm spying on your divisions. What's that shit division? You only have 2 artillery. Where's your 14 force? Yeah. French are more experienced than you. Yeah. Okay. So basically, both the Axis and the Allies will always get Fighter 3s. And for Axis, it's Hungary who does it. That's why Hungary is a very important nation for the Axis to have. And Romania can do the same thing as Canada. They can go down here, acquire fighters. No, sorry, IR 80. Go this way. Get the same bonus basically for Fighter 2s. And then he can license them off. Hungary can license them off Romania and get Fighter 2s quickly. And what Romania does, he requires a lot of focus to get Fighter 3s. But over here, he will go down here, get these focuses, and then he puts both, and then he goes light fighter effort. And this one allows him to get Fighter 3s quickly. So in the middle of 1938, also Hungary has Fighter 3s. And then both the Axis and the Allies have at least one player with Fighter 3s. So that's pretty cool. And the Soviet gets it through Fighter 3s through his focus over here. So everyone gets Fighter 3s before 1940. Actually, in the end of 1938 for most. Germany will not produce Fighter 3s usually, but we can go into that explanation later. But at least one of his team gets, like a few players in his team gets Fighter 3s. Why is world tension good for allies, and how does this affect the game? World tension is a way to actually prevent the Axis from expanding. Because every time they expand, like with focuses or justifying war, and get more territory, they raise world tension, and in return, allies will be able to do more focuses. And if the world tension goes high enough, they can justify war and start a war, and they can get better economic laws for when the world tension is higher and when they're at war. So they can get partial once the world tension is higher, and when they're at war they can get war economy or total mobilization. So basically, if the world tension is instantly raised to 10% at the start of the game, all the allied nations, let's say Russia and everyone else, will get a better economy. And the Axis already start with partial, so they get no benefit by raising the world tension in itself. Like maybe they can get a war economy, but that's about it. And all the allies goes from the worst kind of economic loss to quite a decent one. and then basically the game is considered over if that happens. The allies kind of usually considered actual winners if that happens too early, and the game is usually cancelled if that for some reason would happen. This is quite obvious. Why is Strategic Bombers banned? We have gone through it. What are Space Marines? That question comes up a lot. Like, what are the what's considered Space Marines? These are actually heavy tanks. Usually, I'll take a parenthesis. Like heavy tanks, one heavy tank plus infantry and some other stuff like artillery, etc. etc. And why is it so strong to build these kinds of divisions? Heavy tank destroyer. And we could go into the division template designer and have a look at it. Let's say we have these divisions with low infantry and we add a light tank. And we'll look at the armor value of the division and we'll see something. We will see 5 armor. And we might ask, that's not a lot of armor necessarily. Say we will look at the armor here. That's 15. We get 30% of the armor value. But it's actually always 30%. So if you have a large division and we add this one. Oh, I would have to move this one around a bit to show it properly. Partially, here we go. We will rearrange those ones. Free artillery there. It doesn't actually cost any arm experience to rearrange. Let's say we add this tank again to a larger division. Wouldn't we get lots of armor? No, we actually get the same armor value. It's always 30% base, and then it's plus the average of the rest of the division. So if we would add a heavy tank, it would get 30% of the armor value of the heavy tank. Armor. So 30% of a 70 armor, you would get more than 20 armor. Oh, well, that's actually a lot of armor. And your division will be considered unpierceable by most normal divisions. And that will result in taking 20% of the damage. If the enemy can't pierce armor, take only 25% of the damage. So basically, you take next to no damage if the enemy are not able to pierce you. And you require very little equipment to add it in a large division, or well, just add 1 battalion in a large division. So basically, it's almost free to get it. Just add one battalion of heavy tanks in each, and your divisions will crush enemy infantry instantly. There's no way for you to lose against normal infantry, basically. And why is it a heavy tank destroyer? Well, because the piercing is high, 96 piercing, and it works the same way. So if we look at this smaller division, and we don't have the example here, but we can actually use a normal tank. So we'll look at the piercing value of the division first. 4 piercing, that's very low. So it would not be able to pierce itself if we put a light tank in another division. It would not be able to pierce it. So we go to the light tank and we look at piercing. Oh, 15 piercing. Going up by 11. We might actually expect it to go up by the same value. Yeah, it goes up by 10.8. And this works the same way. It's basically, I don't know if it's 20% or whatever, 30%. Let's see what the piercing was here. Piercing, 30, yeah, it's a bit more than 30%. Like 35% or something. So if you have 96 piercing, you will get 30 piercing. So basically your infantry divisions will be able to pierce a lot of enemy divisions just by that, because the base value is increased by the just one division, the highest, like the if one, and it will take the highest, the battalion with the highest value, and take 30% of it and add it here, plus 60% of the average value. And you don't care about the average value, you just add one for the base value. So basically, it's a cheap way of buffing your infantry. It's like having a super aura in Warcraft 3 or something that gives you like a bunch of armor and a bunch of attack very cheaply. It becomes the heavy tank and becomes like a hero unit with super auras. That's why it's banned. It's considered very cheesy. And there are usually template rules. And that's well, not everyone cares too much about it, but what will happen is that people will have a 60% artillery and 10% infantry, and will just attack into each other and become a meat grinder. No one will defend ever, and you will have like 50% anti-tank guns and 50% infantry, and you don't care too much about tanks anymore necessarily, because you just kill tanks with infantry when you have enough anti-tank guns. So that's a bit lame. Basically, it reduces if not having this rule. If you're not having this rule, you will limit the numbers that are used. Usually. And that's usually why it's banned. It's not too fun to play with. What are considered exploits? Well, there are quite a few things which are considered exploits. I will not go through all of them, but basically the programming is not excellent always, and that affects things quite heavily in certain aspects. Let's see if he's trying to do war with me. Can't tell. Because I only have one division still. We don't care too much about it. It's not gonna do anything against us. Here we go. So, should we go for one? One is that, let's say you put up your navy. And the enemy puts up his navy, and you put your navy on hold position or do not engage, and you have a larger navy, and then you naval invade him. That's considered an exploit of the game mechanics, because he cannot destroy your ships, because your ships will run away if they enter a battle with do not engage option. And you can still use you can still naval invade. And that's very annoying, very annoying. And because the game is usually meant to be like, oh, only if you have enough ships you can naval invade. But let's say you put them on do not engage, you can never lose them unless someone naval bombards them from the air, perhaps. But then they will actually shoot back at the airplanes, even if they do not engage on. So that's a very lame way of approaching the game. That's not acceptable. The only acceptable way of using do not engage is if you want to go home to your naval base and repair your ships. That's usually alright to do. Other exploits, I will not tell all of them because I will not teach you exploits, but there are ways of getting templates of free units. Let's say could actually get like a bunch of really strong units for free in certain ways in the game for certain events and different things. and it's very easy to spot if people have done it, but that's considered an exploit because those are for free, and those were not the way it was intended. It's just poor programming in the game. And let's say there are events. If you don't click OK, let's say it pops up an event on my screen, and if I don't click on it, nothing will happen actually. Let's say you are the Spain and you just have the event and you don't click on it, you just move it to the side, then the civil war never happens when the pop-up comes because you never click OK, the civil war happens. You just let it stay there on the screen forever and ever. So that's why it's considered, that thing is considered an exploit. Or oh, okay. Did he fail? Did he invade China yet? Oh, he did, and he got spaghetted. Oh, nice. Wow. Why does Romania only build marines, for example, in multiplayer? You might wonder, like, why doesn't he build tanks or airplanes or something? He could technically build some airplanes, but you will basically only see marines. That's because you have ministers in the game that gives you bonuses. They have this guy in Romania as well, special forces, and special forces are marines, paratroopers, and mountaineers. So let's say you build mountaineers or marines, you will get this 15% bonus in attack and defense, and that's really good. And you have your infantry expert, so you get the total of 25% and 30% respectively, and that's really grotesque. And you will just let Germany build tanks instead of you, and you don't need to put too much effort into airplanes. Italy and Hungary and those guys can build those. And marines especially are useful against Russia because they can actually get like attack bonuses over rivers, and Russian players usually stand behind the rivers with forts. So the only way of breaking the forts are either with supreme air power and close air support, or having strong marines plus air force. So those marines are very useful against Russia, and they can also be used in like to invade the islands and helping against the Suez or whatever. They're actually quite useful. How many fighter planes does Axis have when the war starts? Like, it's actually not 50-50% CAS and fighters. It's quite obvious why. Like, you need fighters first. CASs are always useful. No, only if you have enough fighters. And why is that? Because the airplanes will only take off. Close air support. I can show you which one this is. These are close air support. High damage. Only attacks in air zones that are not red. Red means enemy has much more fighters than you do. So you need a certain amount of fighters compared to the enemy to even use your close air support in the region. Let's see, what are they trying to do now? I don't see a national focus set for Germany. No, he does not. But I don't need more arm experience anyways, so I have enough. I have 30 for support companies later on. No. Oh, Jesus Christ. So you always need the fighters. There's no way around it, basically. If you're gonna use close air support and you need fighters, there's no way of doing it. But what about the numbers? Well, usually Axis at 1939 August will have 6,000 to 9,000 planes, fighters, and 300 to 800 close air support. We can make it 1,000, it's not too much of a difference. So that's the numbers, and allies. They usually have like somewhere between 6,000, no, 4,000, 5,000 in total. If some of the miners do it as well, 5,000 to 7,000. And usually the Axis have a little more fighters. It depends. There are different strategies, but you will often see these kinds of numbers when there are decent players in the game. And most of the planes will usually be fighter ones. And if there are lower numbers and there are decent players, maybe they're building more fighter threes and then you see lower numbers. But they're still effective, their forces. Why are there? I think they are there. Commit. Why are there our requirements for majors? Well, if people don't know you, or they need something to judge you. And it's just the first thing to judge you off. Like, let's say you know the host. If you know the host and he considers you skilled, you can play enemy major. Usually. So this is usually for random people. If you don't know the player, you need to check him for something. And that's one of the things you check for. There are more things you check the player for, actually. It's not just the hours. And the other thing is actually more things. So then after our check, they will check your Steam profile. You will be forced to link it. This is not optional. They will ask you a question. They will, or rather someone, often the host, will ask you questions. Like, let's say you really want to play Germany, and they've checked your hours, and he might ask, like, what's your first focus? And you're responding, oh, I'm going army innovations because I want more army experience and everything. And he's like, oh, you're fucking retard. And you will not be able to play Germany. You will not be able to play something else because you have no experience. And no one realizes. But let's say you're actually an experienced player. You have a lot of hours and you know what you're doing. So you say, oh, I'm going this way. And everything, and I'm building tanks or whatever, and just ask some. It might be that question, and he must ask you, like, for how long do you build civilian factories? And you say, oh, up till 1938, and then I build some couple of refineries, and then build military factories. And then it's like, oh, you're good to go. That's usually how it goes. Like, people are actually don't have harsh questions. It's like, and they actually ask you quite obvious things. So, like, it's usually just basic questions. Don't be worried about it. You will learn it quite quickly. And you might wonder, but don't I need to play the major to realize how to play it? Well, you can just play a minor. And just look at what focuses they pick. You can save the game actually a few times, and then you can load it up as different players. And you can see what they do. And if someone played really well, you can check what he did. So it doesn't require much games. You just need to load the game after the game and just. Oh, AI Japan is successful, whereas the player is not. Why is there only one player in each faction controlling the airplanes? This one is also quite simple, and I think most players should know it. Let's say you build a fighter. Well, the property of the fighter can't be changed under normal circumstances. Like, you can actually convert equipment from one thing to another, but that's not why you send the planes to another person. The reason is that doctrines will buff your units and they will work better. Like air doctrine, this buffs tanks, this buff most infantry divisions. These are like better planning bonuses, these are recovery bonuses on mass assault. But on airplanes, this buffs basically your close air support here, and your infantry actually when you have close air support, or your tanks as well. This one makes your strategic bombers better, obviously. This one makes your fighters better. So usually send all your fighters and everything to one person that has operational integrity. And you have like these high numbers of fighters that you send to one player, like thousands of, like he can at the end of a game like 1942, you can have like 20,000 fighters on one guy. And that guy is the only guy in the team that has researched the air doctrine, so no one else has to use their time to research the air doctrines to have decent airplanes. That saves up a lot of research time. So the total time here is like 1 year, 2 year, 3 year. Like this will take like 4 years to research. So basically that frees up one research slot for 4 years approximately, if not everyone has to do it, and that's for everyone who then does not need to do it, and that's really efficient way. And the secondary point, let's put it down, only one guy in each team needs to do the air doctrine. Wow, so effective, much effectiveness. And let's say we have a secondary thing, is that now only one guy can micro the airplanes, and that makes a more effective use of it. So let's say we have one guy on one time. Let's say you just spread it out, the airplanes, like one guy, he comments 2000, he comments 2000, he comments 2000, 2000. Then you need to all at one time use all the planes that in one spot, and then you need all four guys to do it. Otherwise, you will only maybe use 50% of the planes, and the enemy use 100% of the planes if it's just one guy in the enemy team. And you can imagine the problems. You will get horrendous casualties if the enemy has double the amount of planes that you do in one place. So you want only one guy to do it that is devoted to it, and the other guys can do other things. That's fantastic. Look, they can micro their ground forces, and another guy can just micro the airplanes, and he does basically nothing else. It's usually Canada in the Allies that does that thing, or the UK that does the Air Force thing, and it's always Hungary in the Axis that does it. So those things are quite simple. And these are common things for multiplayer. Now we've gone through the concepts that are very common in multiplayer, and you will quickly realize why people can see if you're a new player in multiplayer. There's no way to hide it, people will spot it almost immediately. And if you're hosting games, you will quickly realize why the rules are in place, so, the way they are, and why there is such extensive numbers of rules. These are quite a few rules. You can say the host or the mods will determine what isn't they can exploit because there are quite a few. No deleting, converting buildings, no deleting, etc, etc, etc. Quite a few things. You always need to go through them if there's a Discord or a TeamSpeak game. You always have to look through the rules. Maybe you want to wonder, how do I do this quickly? I'm France, I'll look. So let's see, we're France here, and this is my rules that I have to follow. If France falls, you have to continue playing as Free France. No Franco-British Union, no building ports, most accept London Sudetenland demands. That's what I have to follow on top of these ones, basically. And if you ask the host, usually they can explain rules, and other players can. And this is the basics for this video, and we'll just wrap it up.